Jack. I'm the lead sales engineer, solutions engineer at Syncari, and I hope you're here to talk about my talk, the production gap, why bad data, not AI, is the exact reason why these processes don't scale properly. Getting into it, I'll try to keep this tight. I try to not make these boring, but I do hope we can kind of break down any AI pilots you're working on, any foundational pieces you're running to make your data AI ready, like everyone's talking about today, and turn that into something actionable, right? So first things first, let's see. Can I make it run? Great. How many of you guys have any sort of integration tool, something to move data from system A to system B? Please raise your hand if your company has at least one. What about 2 integration tools? What about 5 integration tools? 10. Don't be shy. No, it's okay. It's very common to have more than 10, 15, 20, if not more. In fact, the average for enterprises from a lot of the major analysts is 14 different integration tools. That might be kind of duplicative, but it is very common, right? If we take integration tools and enterprises having at least 14 on average, well, then your AI strategy is kind of dead if you rely on integration to put that together, right? Because if integration worked, you wouldn't need 14 different tools to do that, right? So what might be a strategy? Is that data lakes? Is that putting your data lakes together to try and build proper AI? Well, no. You are still going to end up with silos. You're going to have shadow data lakes. You're going to have proper data lakes, different warehouses and whatnot. Those are all owned and run by different teams, and everybody's got their own AI that they're running off those individual pieces. We're all still trying to avoid the issue of somebody copying and pasting your proprietary data into a public ChatGPT license, right? So no, that's not going to work. Data lakes are not a foundational strategy for how to run proper AI, right? Integration, still not a strategy. Sure, it helps you bring your data silos together. It puts it in kind of a controlled place, but you still don't have any of those foundational pieces. It still doesn't come together in any meaningful way. This is the reason why most AI pilots fail, because you're working on a very important subset where the data is not going to scale, the process is not going to scale once you hit production, right? Because just taking certain data warehouses that exist in silos, starting to plug them together, does not equal a strategy. Why should you trust me? Why do I know what that is? Well, let's talk about a traditional ecosystem. If we take the pieces on the left, those would be your sources of information, things like SaaS applications, things like data warehouses, Salesforce, BigQuery, Snowflake, everything in between. You're also going to have your data entry or chat applications, kind of unstructured, semi-structured data. That also will be some sort of source. And then, of course, documents, things like Excel files, things like PDFs, all the pieces that go feed into this layer together. You'll pump that into some sort of warehouse, ETL it to your analytics layer to produce reports and produce some sort of output, right? Now, again, most AI pilots fail because this is the structure of most orgs. You have your data sources, you put it in warehouse 1, you ETL and transform it into warehouse 2 and try to produce analytics or send it back to the source application on top of that. But what you're not covering for is governance, observability, automation, freshness, how to handle that unstructured data, and everything in between. Now, if we take this structure and we add various sorts of pilots, things on the actual applications themselves, chat bots into your website and pieces there, some sort of OCR or analytical layer on top of those documents, you plug AI into any set as part of this process, they are still siloed and working off only a subset. We've come back to the same problem that we started with out of the gate, which is integration is not a strategy, neither is siloed warehouses. These are just going to create more problems, and any pilot you engage in will fail in production because you are not looking at the entire context of the rest of the data set. So what do I suggest? Am I suggesting traditional data management solutions? Well, we kind of know that they're old. They've been around longer than I've been alive, right? So that's not great. They're also a nightmare to develop. Anybody who's undergone any sort of master data management project knows that it might be 3 or 4 years, and then everything you started with is gone. In fact, many people have started master data projects before AI blew up, and they're still working on them. So that's not going to work. And then, of course, even when you're there, it's still super slow, right? You finally get it together, you finally get it set up, you need to make change, you want to provide outputs or value back to your business teams or people who would consume this, and it's super duper challenging, right? I'm certain anybody who's gone through any sort of standard master data management solution or deployment has seen these kinds of things, at least in a limited capacity. So, well, what do I suggest? Well, there's this whole new concept of agentic MDM solutions, things that kind of run a bit more autonomously. And here's something that we actually did at Syncari. I'll talk about ways that you can build this if you don't want to work with me. But something that we've done before, and what we're seeing with a lot of our larger customers, is being able to kind of replace integration processes, siloed warehouses with something that runs a bit more autonomously. You have that central layer that heals and iterates and changes over time, where you're able to output the pieces back to your different AI models, your different agents, govern and control that centrally. And we're seeing that at a scaling rate for all kinds of technology companies. Now, besides kind of the shameless plug that I'm doing here, let's talk about how you actually do this, right? This is what we've done at Syncari, but something you can do yourself should you not want to talk to me, right? Which is, build that core agentic MDM layer. You have your different data sources, SaaS applications, databases, warehouses, lakes, anything where the data can be inputted. You plug that into a core layer where you can govern, control, and manage that, hopefully in a way and a meaningful understanding that both your technical and non-technical teams can collaborate on to build a better ecosystem. That unified data hub, right, where you can run natural language processing, standard BI, and make it easier to run off that. Once that foundational layer exists, right, you're kind of streaming updates, certain pieces back with all of your applications, you plug a centralized MCP server on it to run frameworks, proper agents, apps, and otherwise. Why is this the approach? Well, if you've talked to many AI companies that run those individual silos, you'll know that governance is a major problem, right? You have to integrate with Salesforce. You have to integrate with every individual system, and you have no centralized layer on this. You'll have the same authentication for a CIO as you would a data steward, and that's very hard to manage and track and actually do in a production set. But if you have that centralized model that can act as a wrapper for all of the different AI pieces, you can produce a highly governed, highly activated output that actually runs the changes and pieces that you're working on for your entire data set. You have assistants, agents, and apps, all from an AI lens, operating off the same data set and providing proper outputs back to all of your source applications. You reduce and break down those silos to build an automatic, auto-healing, auto-processing layer for all of the data that exists in the entire org. So what's really the issues, right? Why does this work and everything else that I've talked about not work? Well, if we kind of think of the core pieces, you talk about debt. You have 20 years in a lot of cases of technology that you've been working on. Things that exist and some people know how it works and other people don't know how it works. It's kind of hard to get it all together in a meaningful way. You might have old technology, things that are struggling to keep up and scale with all the different pieces and other subsets, other AI pilots that you're working on. Not to mention, it's not common that everybody in the org trusts the data coming out of that application. There's also the traditional integration failures. Maybe this is working, maybe it's not, but it's hard to manage and track changes. APIs update, systems update, processes update, and it's hard to manage as you totally scale and increase for a lot of different applications. There's, of course, the lack of real-time observability. Everybody knows about how bad stale data is. I won't talk about freshness much there. But then there's also inefficiencies, issues in when the pipelines or processes are actually running, how do we make sure that that runs in a state and deals in a meaningful way that you can actually output it back to your business or non-technical users to use in a meaningful time without bottlenecks? And then finally, of course, again, I won't spend a lot of time on this. We've talked about it a lot already, but governance. Trying to make sure that the right people access the right types of data at the right time, and you're not leaking that out into the wider ecosystem. I'm certain all of us have seen the various reports over the past year about how various AI products were just able to consume way more data than they were governed to do so. And so these kinds of things are what block all the traditional approaches, whether it's warehouses, integration layers, traditional master data, or even all of them together, right? We need that wrapper, that core layer to bring it all together. And so just to kind of talk about the types of ecosystems we see, back on my kind of soapbox, what we did with Altair a little over a year and a half ago, is all about taking all of those data from those various sources, bringing it into that agentic wrapper, where we're able to centralize the governance, centralize the workflow, centralize the modeling, and then output it to these various pieces where you can run AI centrally. Whether that's master data layers, whether that's lifecycle management, whether that's finance or other layers on top of that, you can plug whatever you need to on that model, and you know that the backing data for those pieces is good, hygienic, and running off of that centralized set. So whether you want to come talk to me by the front door in the other room and talk about agentic master data, the things that I encourage you guys to do as part of this process, if you take something away from my monologue here, is don't shovel it under the rug. If you hide the technical debt, if you put pieces away in the name of something new and shiny, it will come up when you hit the production data set. If you need to really make people adopt it and use it more effectively, establish trust with those users. Figure out what is going to make the people who need to consume this trust the data. And then, of course, don't think about individual small pieces and have those AI run independently. Build plans to scale those as the data sets get larger and more people adopt those models. I've been to at least 3 different conferences this year talking to different CDOs, CIOs, and other technical leaders, and they all talk about these 3 things as their core issues when they're trying to implement those pieces. Proper governance, trust, technical debt, and scaling issues are what always break down these different AI pieces. So again, you can build this. I don't want to say that you can't. You certainly could, but you can also buy it and you can come talk to me and we'll break down those individual pieces. So I encourage you guys to check us out at our booth. We're by the front door in the other room. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to talk to you about the processes you guys might have. You can also come to follow us on LinkedIn, the company page, and see all those different pieces there. And either way, I really encourage you to think about that centralization layer. Go against the grain of just traditional integration, warehousing, or even management solutions, and do something centralized that actually outputs back and makes truth exist in all of your applications. That's my pitch. I hope it was somewhat meaningful. And I encourage you guys to check us out or at least take that away. And I would be really excited to talk to you in more detail about that. Thank you so much for listening to my monologue. And if you have any questions, I will be beside the booth for a few minutes and happy to talk to you about it. Thank you so much.